In this video, I will go over installing an upgraded heat exchanger on this 2005 Mercedes E55 AMG. All supercharged cars need to deal with a lot of heat, and the stock heat exchanger on this car is not ideal. I will be putting an upgraded PLM heat exchanger for the E55, which has about 4,000 square inches of cooling surface compared to the stock 2,600 square inches. This will help the intake air temperature recover much faster. This install is pretty much the same process for all of the supercharged 55K cars, and this car already has the updated Bosch 010 cooler pump, which I would recommend doing if you don't already have it. So the tools that you will need include a 16mm socket and wrench, a 10mm socket and wrench, pliers to remove hose clamps, and a flat screwdriver. We'll start this video with the bumper already off the car, as that is a pretty simple process. So here we see the stock heat exchanger with one of the engine oil coolers attached to the bottom of it, and you can see that this heat exchanger is slightly bent on the driver's side, likely from someone riding the bumper over a curb in a parking lot. We start by draining the coolant from the radiator into a plastic jug. If your coolant has been recently replaced, you can put it back in the car later. I'm going to change the coolant for the whole system in this car, as I'm draining the engine block as well from the driver's side near the engine mount. This is a good time to put new coolant in the car. Next, we drop the oil cooler by loosening the 10mm nuts on one side and sliding out the other from the bracket. Next, we remove the hoses on the passenger side left-hand drive car of the heat exchanger by pulling the clamps back with pliers and pulling out the hoses. Then we pop open the metal tabs on top of the heat exchanger and push up on the bottom clips to release the heat exchanger from its mountings. It then pulls away from the plastic ducting. Compared to the old heat exchanger, not only does the new one look way better, it's quite a lot bigger. The PLM unit is nicely put together with good quality welds. We'll transfer the rubber grommets to the brackets that came with the new heat exchanger. If you have an earlier E55, you don't have this lower oil cooler, so you don't have to worry about this. Next, we need to loosen the 16mm nuts from the crash bar, which the new heat exchanger will mount to. Then I test fit the new heat exchanger to see how it looks. It fits, but it will need some more spacing from the crash bar to clear the tabs on the bumper. Instead of just using washers, I made brackets on each side of the heat exchanger to provide a little extra gap and cover each side of the heat exchanger so there aren't just holes behind the grille. Once I was happy with the position of the heat exchanger, I painted the custom covers and bolted everything down. The 16mm bolts are torqued to 55 Nm or 40 foot-pounds. I reused part of the plastic ducting that went around the old heat exchanger by cutting off the ends. After that, I plugged the hoses into the new heat exchanger and secured them with the clamps. Then I bolted the oil cooler brackets onto the heat exchanger, and the oil cooler slides in. Then, on the other side of the oil cooler, the bracket is bolted in. Once everything is tight on the oil cooler, we can see that this setup is shaping together and the bumper is ready to be attached. The installation of the bumper is in reverse order to removal, but the tabs that go under the crash bar need to be filed flat so that they can fit between the heat exchanger and the crash bar. The plastic pin on the end also needs to be shaved in the back. Once this is all done, the bumper does fit nicely over this heat exchanger, and it needed only a little modification. Next, we have to refill the coolant, and what we are doing is mixing the Mercedes coolant at 45% of the coolant and 55% distilled water, according to the owner's manual for protection down to -30 degrees Celsius. After filling the coolant, we need to bleed the system on the E55 and CLS55. This is done by running the intercooler pump. You can bypass the relay in the trunk and run the pump until there are no bubbles visible, and you can clamp the return line for better flow. Otherwise, the system will bleed to the reservoir after running the engine up to temperature, so check the reservoir level once the car has heated and then cooled, and see if you need to add any coolant. Otherwise, this job is done. The next job on this car is the paint, which really needs a serious correction. Anyways, thanks for watching, and subscribe for more videos like this.